Hey everybody, how's it going? Just doing another and I guess final review of the Bayer Montana bamboo longbow. I was finally able to get one for myself. There's a few caveats here I'll have to throw in, but the bow, it's the same bow as the last video. It is 64 inches long. It's a reflex deflex bow, so that means it has a slight, it's not a recurve, it has a slight angle coming out, gives you a little bit of tension to send a little more energy to the center of the string. I like reflex deflex bows. I think they perform a little better. The bow is, as it's marked, is 55 pounds at a 28-inch draw. So I'll check that on the scale here in a little bit. The bow itself is made, it's a maple core in the middle and flamed bamboo belly and back. And that's really, it's aesthetically pleasing, and it's got a few neat things about it. It's kind of tapered on the back here of the bow. It's kind of tapered in here into the riser, and the bamboo just looks beautiful, especially when you wipe it down and polish it, which you should do. You know, take care of your bow. You know, it'll keep its life, and you know, just keep it cleaned up, take care of your stuff. The riser, I think I mentioned in my last video, wasn't exactly sure what this was, so I looked it up. What the riser is it's solid black phenolic, which it's impregnated with melamine. It's a chemical compound. It's kind of like a resin, so it's kind of like sheets of that solid black phenolic, and it's impregnated with melamine, so it's treated and it's pressure treated. So it's very, very strong, and what it does is it makes it really, really stable at the riser here where the grip is, and it is resistant to like temperature change and stuff. So it's a really stable, you know, riser for your bow. The string that it came with is a Flemish 97 string, which is great. I like those better than the other ones. I think they perform better. I think they last longer. You do need to take care of them though. Just some simple wax every now and then. Just keep an eye on. Don't want them to dry out. So you can get that pretty much any archery website or any of your local stores. You just rub it on there just like you do like crossbows. Just rub it in there with your fingers and make sure it's nice and greased, and you know, the string's great. I mentioned a couple caveats here. There are a couple things. Overall, I absolutely love it. Like I said before, I grew up with a Montana. I had the old one that came out, I think that came out in 96, 98. I can't remember, a long time ago, but I had it forever. But it was the black glass one. This is clear glass, so you're able to see the pretty figure in the flamed bamboo, and it's just a really well performing bow. I like bamboo. That's just my personal preference. So there's a lot of wood that, Osage orange, bubinga. There's different woods that are still great. You know, it's not saying one's better than the other. I just really like bamboo. So I did mention in my last video though, bamboo, it tends to be a little snappy and loud. And that can go away with time, with shooting, but you'll notice like Japanese yumis and hankyu bows and stuff, they do make a noise. I mean, they have a crack to them, just the nature of the wood. So there's a couple things I did. I was able to get this through Three Rivers Archery. Shout out to Three Rivers Archery. One of the best companies I've ever dealt with in the last 25 years. They have wonderful customer service. They actually phoned me to make sure everything was as I wanted. So yeah, it's great. They're really good. They want to make sure that they, you know, their name is out there, and they're giving products to people, and they want to make sure everything's up to snuff and people are satisfied. And I think they do a great job. So I will come around here and show you just the couple things that I did. So the riser I was talking about, you know, of course the bear medallion, that's always there. The riser, that's that material I was talking about. Now, here's one thing that I had changed. Well, we'll start with the noise. The bow is just a little bit loud, so I just had them put these fur strips on these dampeners on the end. It also protects the limb a little bit with the string slap when you release. It's on both ends here. And then I guess the two cons, the only cons really I can think of, is the factory on the riser here on the shelf. The arrow pass here, the factory one was just a thin leather strip with a little leather piece covering it. So I had asked to not have that, and I had the actual Bear company one put on, and it's completely covers the riser and has hair here, so it's much flatter, and the arrow seems to just really work better with that. And these bows, you know, these modern bows, long bows, they're not like an English longbow is the stave is flat all the way. So these are kind of what you call a center shelf cut. So what that does is it brings the arrow in as close as you can get to the center. So it kind of centers your shot. And what that does, I think, is it kind of helps out with the archer's paradox. When you draw a bow, the archer's paradox, and most of you are going to know this, is when you're drawing a full draw like this right here. When you release, the arrow is actually being pushed against the bow, and it's going to kick out, and then it's going to correct itself as it travels. And I'm not sure. I'll test it out. I might test it out on the paper tuning target and see what kind of hole I'm getting in the paper with my fletching, to see how far back it takes that arrow to correct to straighten out. But that helps with that. So it's not coming way off the side and having to go all the way around. It's a center cut. So that kind of helps. The only other con I can think of is I'm not really stoked about the grip. Now, the grip itself is great. It's the leather covering. I think for the price of the bow, I think it could have probably done a little better on that. But you know, a lot of people customize things, and I at some point I'll probably end up, you know, I've had friends who do leather work and stuff like that. I might get a really nice high quality leather, you know, handle grip here. But the grip itself is really comfortable in the hand. You know, it fits right into your hand right there. You know, it's just a natural, you know, like I talked about, you make a V. And that's how you're supposed to hold a bow. You don't choke the life out of your bow here. So you're going to make a V and put it right in there, and that sets the bottom right at the strong part, the heart of your thumb muscle right there, which is in line center with your arm. So when you're shooting with correct form and your shoulder is down, you know, and that is your form, what it's going to look like from the front is really all you're doing. All you need is these two fingers. Your middle finger, your index finger. You just need that wrapped around right there like that. The pressure is coming this way when you draw the bow. So I'm not choking the bow like this and drawing back. I'm just lightly holding it and letting it really sit in right here. And then, so that's the form you're looking for. But yeah, I'll test the weight on it and try this thing out. The arrows, again, I got from Three Rivers Archery. They're Easton Legacy. Easton, I think they're the only company, arrow making company right now that still completely makes everything in the United States. But they have a really specific method of how they make their carbon arrows. They have a die or the casting, however they make it. There's a tour you can see on YouTube of the Easton factory. If you just search Easton Arrow Factory, it'll probably pop up. But the guy there explains the whole process, and that what they do is they get very consistent measurements for, you know, they're all their whether you get a 400, a 350 spine, 400 spine, 500 spine, whatever you get, the inside is very consistent. So the arrows are made really consistent no matter what you're getting. So I have 400 grain arrow, 9.3 grains per pound. So with a 150 grain tip, I think this thing in total, I think I weighed it at 445 grams, I think. But this bow seems to like 400 with a heavy tip. And that brings me to another point. I think that's probably the most important part. The bow is important, of course. You want a good bow, you want a good performing bow, but the arrow, you have to match the arrow to the bow. So it can get a little complicated with what you're wanting to do with your archery. Are you a hunter? You know, are you a 3D competition shooter? Or you like me, you just like to shoot for fun. And you're just really into the science of all this stuff. And I just like that, you know, how all that works together and how important the arrow is and how it's made and the weight of it, the flex of it. You know, you have what's a static spine, which is what it is like this, and then you have what's called a dynamic spine of how much is that arrow flexing when it's pushed out of the bow. So if you're underweight, or let's say let's say this bow was 75 pounds. Like I had a Turkish bow that was 78 pounds. It was 82 at my draw, but so I didn't realize back then I didn't have the perfectly, you know, matched arrows for that bow. And if your arrow is too light, the bow is going to almost act like it's almost dry firing. So you need to match the arrow to the bow in your, you know, grains and your spine, how it's going to flex. So this bow seems to like 400 spine. I could probably get away with 500, maybe, I don't know, maybe 350, but you know, the heavier the bow, the more you're going to want. It's going to want to flex that arrow. So if you're shooting like a 30-pound bow, you're probably going to want to go, I would say probably 600 spine, maybe. And it all, again, depends on your tip. That's very important because that's guiding the arrow, and the fletching is just stabilizing it in the air. So it's more really about the front weight to me. You got to match that up with the arrow to get that thing to send down range correctly. And if it has good, decent fletching on it, that'll take care of itself, and it'll all work out. But anyway, let's go weigh this thing. Let's see on the scale what it said 55 at 28. And I'm gonna see what this thing is at my draw length, which is 30, it's between 31 and 32. I haven't measured it exactly, but I have an anchor point I use every time. And I'll show you that later, but let's go weigh the bow.